From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. The sprint to November is on as Democrats wrap their national convention in Chicago with the historic nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris. Battle lines are drawn by both campaigns with just over 2 months now to the election. We'll break down what's ahead for both candidates with Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York and Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. RFK Jr. suspending his political campaign and throwing support behind Donald Trump. Our political panel will examine what this all means for Democrats and Republicans in November. Fed Chair Jay Powell says the time has come for the Fed to cut rates. We'll have a report from the annual meeting in Jackson Hole later on this hour. Welcome to the Friday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We have made our way back from Chicago to the nation's capital as we begin with reaction to last night's address by Vice President Harris at the Democratic National Convention. New York Congressman Gregory Meeks, ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was on the floor last evening for that moment and joins us now. Congressman, it's great to see you. You were ensconced, of course, in the New York delegation, which I know firsthand was on the floor right up there toward the stage with thousands of delegates there for the moment last night. I know you're probably peeking out of one eye today. A lot of tired people and a lot of bleary eyes as people get back home from Chicago. But tell us what it was like as a representative from New York, as a man of color, to be there for that historic moment.
Listen, thank you for having me. And you're right, I'm just landing back in New York, but it was well worth it. It was a fantastic 4 days, every day. You know, some was saying that the problem that we as Democrats was going to have, how were we going to top the next day? And to feel a part of history, the camera of history was rolling. To watch the first African-American and Asian member to be nominated as the Democratic nominee to be the 47th president of the United States was just historic. And I can't tell you, I was just overjoyed with every second of it. So it was well worth being a little tired today. But I'll be back to work tomorrow to make sure that she gets now elected. We've got a lot of work to do, as indicated by just about every speaker. We're not taking this for granted. We know that the work now really begins for the next 75 days.
Well, I'll tell you what, we heard a lot from Kamala Harris last evening. She actually got into prime time, which I know was a bit of a task for Democrats this week. It wasn't just the reintroduction, as a lot of folks called it, the biographical message, but she did tackle some important issues, including Israel. And I bring this one up, Congressman, because I know it's close to you, along with a lot of protesters who did not materialize, as many expected last week or this week in Chicago. Let's listen to what Kamala Harris said about the administration's and her campaign's policy on Israel last night.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
Congressman Meeks, as you know, a lot of people are trying to find sunlight between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on this issue. Are they together in that the Harris campaign's goal here would be a two-state solution?
Yeah, they are together. You know, this is something that I work on every day, being the ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And what the Biden administration has been doing for a long period of time, along with the Vice President Harris, is to get a ceasefire and get the hostages released and then start to move forward where we can have a two-state solution, where you have a safe and peaceful Jewish state of Israel and a peaceful state for the Palestinians. This is what the ultimate goal is, to have peace in the Middle East. And she hit it right on the head, that we will always in the United States make sure Israel has that right, because we have to make sure that they're safe from those like Hamas who's a terrorist organization, Hezbollah and Iran and all of the other Iranian-backed militias. So we're going to continue to make sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself. But we also want to make sure that we're getting food and aid into Gaza. We're working with our allies in the Gulf so that we can begin to rebuild Gaza without Hamas having anything to do with the government or continuing to exist there. So she hit it right on the head, and I think that's what the people in Israel want. That's why you see many of them out on the streets on a daily basis. I know that when I talk to family members of those that are still being held hostage, that's what they want. And so I think she really hit it right on the nail right on the head on that issue.
Well, continuing to give Israel what it needs, as you put it, I presume includes weapons. And I bring this up because a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters, those who've been calling into question Joe Biden's Israel policy, were calling for, in the Democratic Party platform, an embargo on weapons shipments to Israel. And of course, you this summer were one of the Democrats, one of the wary Democrats that approved the sale of some $18 billion worth of F-15 fighter jets, 50 of them to Israel. And I know that you held that up over some concerns about what was happening in Gaza. How do you rationalize, Congressman, these two extremes, with some progressive Democrats saying not another weapon and folks like you saying we have to give Israel what it needs?
Well, I think that what the people are concerned with is Gaza. And as you know, the President Biden stopped giving bombs to be utilized, the 2,000-pound bombs in Gaza. It's not appropriate to use in such, with such density that is in Gaza. That's not the way we were in the war. There was different factions or different ways to go after Hamas now therein. And I think those individuals who are talking about no weapons to Israel, they're talking about Gaza. We know that, though, we have to give Israel weapons, because if we don't get them, the biggest threat to Israel is not what's taking place in Gaza right now, because we've done, and Israel has done a substantial job on Hamas, but Hezbollah and Iran. And if we do not give them what they need there, then they are subject to all of the great threat that Iran and Hezbollah propose to the state of Israel. You know, one of the things that they have stated continually, that Israel does not have the right to exist. The only thing that Hamas has in common with Iran and Hezbollah is that they don't believe that Israel has the right to exist. So therefore, the United States will solidly stand behind our strong ally, Israel, and its democracy. And that's why I also have had great hope from talking to other countries in the area, like Jordan, like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE. We saw all of them coming to the aid of Israel when Iran previously sent drones and rockets over, knocking them all down, letting Israel and others fly over their territory. So there are now individuals, and that's what the great hope is, and why I believe we can have a better Middle East, is that there are several Gulf countries, Arab countries, that want to have peace with Israel. And so we've got to stand by them to make sure that those that don't cannot succeed in destroying it.
Well, Vice President Harris talked about the economy as well last evening, among the other issues that are, of course, driving the conversation in this campaign. And, Congressman, you may have heard from Jay Powell earlier today. He was at Jackson Hole saying the time has come to cut interest rates. Did he wait too long?
Well, no, I think that there's a reason why you have an expert like Chairman Powell, and you don't have the president or anyone in government playing politics with the economy. I think that when you look at what has taken place, the appropriate time is now, based upon him. When you look at the unemployment rate and you look at the inflation rate as it starts to decrease. And so so the key is trying to get the right balance in that. And I think that he's saying at this time, looking at those factors, looking at the inflation rate that's continuing to go down. However, you see unemployment going up some. And so the way that you balance that at this time is you begin to reduce the interest rates. So, and I think that's how, and a lot of folks were predicting before that they thought that we were going to go into a recession, which never happened. And so I think that the Chairman Powell deserves credit for what he's done and how he's done it. And so I think that, it's just about right. And we've recovered and recovering. Still got work to do, of course, as the Vice President talked about last night, getting more affordable housing, bringing the cost of food down more. Some of that also has something to do with what's taking place around the world, of course. We're all interconnected in that regard, and where we have food coming in, ships because of the war with Russia invading Ukraine for grain. Sometimes it's difficult in oil. So I think he's doing about right. I think it is that time, though, to look at reducing the interest rates.
Looks like it's going to happen in September. With his view from the Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives, Congressman Gregory Meeks, thanks for the conversation, sir. I hope you get some rest this weekend. Coming up on Balance of Power, we'll have a lot more on Fed Chair Jay Powell's speech today at Jackson Hole. We'll be back with Bloomberg's Michael McKee, who's there. Take a look at that. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Inflation is now much closer to our objective, with prices having risen 2.5% over the past 12 months. While the task is not complete, we have made a good deal of progress toward that outcome.
Fed Chair Jay Powell earlier today, as you saw and heard live on Bloomberg TV and radio at the Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, his comments helping to lift stocks and bonds, with yields falling across the board. The S&P 500 closing today less than 1% away from record highs. Joining us now from Jackson Hole, as Chair Powell said, the direction of travel is clear. We go to Wyoming with Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Correspondent, where, by the way, they've just had the first snowfall of the season in the mountains behind Michael McKee. Michael, great to see you. What a view, I'll tell you, as things wrap up there in Jackson Hole. How did Jay Powell's presentation and his choice of words match your expectations?
Well, it was a little more direct than people expected. We thought he would give a hint that the Fed is likely to cut rates in September. Instead, he all but said it. He didn't use the word September, but he said it's time to change rates. Markets take it that way, and I think that's what the Fed wants. He also didn't hedge at all. In previous comments, he said we have more data to see before we can be confident enough to make a decision. He left that part out. He said they are more confident. So at this point, they are in train for rate cuts starting in September. The question is going to be how much, and then how many after that.
Okay. That's an interesting scenario to consider. And I wonder, Michael, what happens if the August jobs report comes in weaker than expected? Are we back to 50 basis points? Where's that in your head?
Well, it would depend on how weak and also what the unemployment rate does. If the unemployment rate rises and it's because people are being laid off, then the Fed would probably consider 50. If the unemployment rate rises a little bit because there are more people entering the labor force, well, that's a generally good thing for the economy, so it wouldn't push them. So we'll have to take apart the numbers once we get them in the jobs report.
Who needs Kevin Costner when you have Bloomberg's Michael McKee in Jackson Hole? Thank you, Michael. Travel safe, and we appreciate the update today on Balance of Power. Coming up today on Bloomberg, some Democrats have got their eyes on a few surprising states following the DNC. Our reporter panel will be here to break it down for us next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for coming along. With Kamala Harris's ascension to the top of the Democratic ticket, party members are hopeful in some unexpected places, taking a different look at the map and looking beyond just the Rust Belt. With that and more, reaction to Kamala Harris' speech at the DNC last night, the culmination of the Democratic National Convention. Bloomberg's Megan Scully and Dan Flatley are with us now. It's great to see you both. Happy Friday to both of you here. Megan, House members were celebrating inside that convention hall. You cover Congress for a living and help to lead our coverage. It was the House that really drove Joe Biden out of this race in the end. And you could hear the celebration on the other side this week, couldn't you?
Yes, the House, and specifically Nancy Pelosi. And, you know, I feel like Democrats 2 months ago felt like the House was no longer within their reach. And then particularly after the energy and enthusiasm coming out of this convention, they see that as a real distinct possibility for them to reclaim the majority in that chamber.
I spoke earlier today on Balance of Power with Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois. Her district touches Chicago, where we spent this week. She was in the room last night talking about where she and other Democrats are focusing their efforts now post-convention.
Those states that we look at as more blue are helping the states and deploying to the states that are more red or more purple. And that's how the resources will be divvied up. But like, I'm even going to Florida in the next week, and I know some of my colleagues right from the convention, they went to Michigan.
How far do we push this conversation, Dan? Joe Biden was looking at 7 states. You could argue really 3 in the Rust Belt: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Democrats are talking about throwing money around in Florida. They're looking at other states to expand the map through the Sun Belt. Is it money well spent?
Well, I think that those 7 states that you mentioned, Joe, still matter the most, obviously. You know, we're talking about in the South, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Pennsylvania is still a very key state for both candidates. Michigan is a key state for Democrats, Wisconsin. What you hear there, though, is confidence. And I think that is something that you do want to lean into if you're the Democrats. You want to keep up that momentum, and saying that you're going to think about Florida, that you're going to think about some of these red states or swingier states is a demonstration of that confidence, and that could buoy your performance in some of these key states as well.
Of course, just a couple weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were talking about Donald Trump and Republicans potentially expanding the map. They're going to Virginia. They're talking about New York. This thing has turned on a dime. But that's the presidential race, Megan. When you look at House races, things get a lot murkier. They're much more dependent upon local issues, the local district, the candidates who are running. How do you put the two together?
So I think you have a couple of different things going on here. I think that coming out of this convention, those 18 districts that Biden carried in 2020, which were, you know, there are several in New York and several in Southern California and others sprinkled around the country. I think that voters are going to, you know, given the enthusiasm, and this is all a turnout game in these close districts and states, that this is positive for House Democrats, particularly in those areas, that if this enthusiasm keeps up, that's a good thing for Kamala Harris and for Democrats writ large. What's interesting and what I'll be watching closely is what's going on in the Senate races. The Senate is very much up for grabs. It is a difficult map for Democrats this year. But the states that they had been really fighting for, Pennsylvania and Michigan and some others, Wisconsin, now look like they're still close, but looking much more favorable for Democrats. That gives them some wiggle room to make long shot plays in states like Florida and states like Texas, which have been long elusive goals for Democrats.
Let's just push this whole thing right over and talk about Texas for a minute then, because you might have noticed, Dan, Colin Allred, congressman from Texas, Democrat, got a primetime speaking slot last night. And there's polling out that shows him within 2 points of Ted Cruz in a very important, very expensive Senate race in Texas. We're not having a serious conversation about flipping a Texas Senate seat blue, are we?
You know, that's always been a prize out there that the Democrats have had their eyes on. Texas. To really turn Texas blue would be a huge win.
Is it?
No, I mean, well, you know, there is there's been an influx of population. People have moved into the cities in Texas. It's still very much a red state in terms of both culture and politics. And Ted Cruz has been here before. He has lots of folks have tried to unseat him. He's managed to hold on. So, whether that will happen this cycle or not remains to be seen. Seems still unlikely, but there is the hope that at some point in the future, Texas could turn blue, at least for one election or maybe more.
Well, remember this as we move our way closer to November. Something else important happened today on the presidential campaign trail, somewhere we haven't talked about quite as often recently. A presidential candidate named RFK Jr. He suspended his presidential campaign today. You might have thought it had already happened. It was the third-party candidate losing support here among the electorate and taking his remaining share of votes to hand it essentially to Donald Trump. Here's part of what he said at a news conference earlier.
President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign.
Says he's not endorsing, but he's supporting. I'm confused. Megan, but does it matter? Since Joe Biden left the race, we have seen his vote share shrink quite a lot. And a lot of folks think that this, in fact, could just go to Donald Trump, but it might not be enough to make a difference.
So we've certainly seen, at one point he was polling over 10%, and I believe he's now under 5%. In a lot of these states, the margins are going to be much closer than that 5%. I am not entirely certain, though, that his endorsement of Donald Trump translates into his voters, RFK's voters, going into Donald Trump's camp. They might just sit out the election. I also think many of the voters who had supported RFK Jr. initially, particularly young voters, did so because they weren't happy with their choices between Biden and Trump, and they really wanted to look to a new generation. They're getting that new generation now with the Harris-Walz ticket, so they're much more inclined, I think, to go into that camp. But in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, the blue wall, and Arizona as well, and Nevada, these elections could be swung by a couple thousand votes in each of the states. So any movement matters. But we're still also 75 days out. And given the way this news cycle has gone, that's an eternity.
We're out of time, but what do you think? Trump 2.0, RFK Jr., Health and Human Services, FDA?
I think people are looking for a change, and however they can get it, that's what they're interested in.
What's the job of the administration, though? Vaccines are? I want to know. Bloomberg's Megan Scully. We thank you, of course, Dan Flatley. Great conversation, and thanks for being with us here on Balance of Power. Coming up, now that the DNC is behind us, the sprint is on for November. We'll look into the crystal ball with Larry Sabato next on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I was very encouraged by the speech last night. There was one word that came through so strongly when the Vice President talked about the economy, and that was opportunity. And I think that's exactly the right word, because it's a word that embraces everybody.
Former Treasury Secretary and Wall Street Week contributor Larry Summers reflecting on Vice President Kamala Harris's speech from last night. Indeed, she calls it the opportunity economy that she's proposing. Let's bring in Larry Sabato, editor-in-chief of Sabato's Crystal Ball and, of course, director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Larry, it's great to see you back. Everyone's a little tired today after staying up late because Democrats had a tough time keeping the schedule here to prime time, which I'm going to ask you about. But more generally, you watched the speech last night and provided a lot of analysis running up to it. Did she strike the balance? We know she made people in the room happy. That was undeniable. But the balance of including the audience at home.
The question to ask when someone who is not president is giving a presidential acceptance address is, did he or she look like a president, sound like a president, and enable people watching at home who don't know him or her? Could they imagine that individual being behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office? I think the answer is yes to all those questions for her. That was the best speech I've ever heard her give. Now, we don't follow vice presidents all that closely, but she had been good in some quarters and not in others. This was absolutely a home run.
The mix of entertainment and culture seemed to get pretty high marks here. You had half of Hollywood up there at one point or another during the course of the week. And it's interesting, Larry. I'm curious about the way they used media and influencers around this whole convention. As we reported, 200 so-called influencers were given access to the convention. They were allowed to use the DNC studios inside the United Center and some of the other facilities. And it seemed like the old primetime East Coast TV audience didn't matter so much. The principals, with the exception of Kamala Harris, spoke late. Joe Biden was on after midnight. That continued with what appeared to be difficulty maintaining the run of show. But, Larry, maybe it was by design. Is this aimed at social media the next day or word of mouth, or how does this work now?
Well, the first night may have been by design. Now, I don't want to diss the current president who stepped down, Joe Biden, but I don't think they were terribly unhappy that his speech ran into the next day. For Eastern time, most people in the East were asleep. Most people in Central time were asleep. You know, let's be honest, he's still in the 30s in approval ratings. But they got it together by the fourth night, and that's the one that really matters, because it's the acceptance address by the nominee that tends to be a part of the voters' evaluation of that candidate. She did a good job, a great job, really, and it was in time to be seen by East, all the Middle, and West, too.
Yeah. Well, now the demand is to provide details. That's what we're certainly hearing from her Republican critics and a lot of folks in the media. Sit down for an interview. You've got to do a news conference. We need to detail these policy points. Larry, is there a double standard when it comes to these two campaigns? Because I don't hear as many people demanding that from Donald Trump, whose plan for inflation is drill, baby, drill.
Well, his plans are whatever he decides to talk about at that given moment, meaning whatever tweet he's seen or post he's seen that irritated him that day. Look, of course, there's a double standard here, but Kamala Harris is doing the right thing, Joe. What she is doing is ignoring a lot of these demands, because by giving a lot of specific details about this plan or that plan that she's got, she simply gives Republicans more fodder for attack, and for that matter, gives the news media more fodder for attack. Why should she worry about either group? It's not as though the voters are demanding details. The candidates who issue white papers usually lose. So, you know, keep on keeping on there, Kamala.
Well, that's something to hear from Larry Sabato, because those demands are probably not going to end, and I suspect she'll have to sit for an interview at some point. There's also going to be a debate on the 10th of September. But I wonder, after what you just saw, it sounds like you thought it was a pretty good production, Larry. We know that Democrats got more eyeballs than Republicans did in Milwaukee. They had higher ratings in Chicago. What will the post-convention bounce look like, or did it already happen before she got there?
Well, that's what we're all looking for, because recently, meaning in the last several elections, there really hasn't been a bounce. And that is a dramatic change from earlier in American history, when there, at least the polling period that we have, when bounces could be a half dozen points or more in some cases. But we'll see. She might have added another point or two, and in a close race like this one, that point or two could matter. It could also fade into oblivion. There's enough time, 74 days, for that to happen. But we'll see. We'll see. I think they had a better convention, the Democrats did, than the Republicans did, and the Republicans had a pretty good convention. So that isn't going to determine the result. You mentioned the debate. You better believe that matters, because now people know debates really make a difference, because they remember June 27th, and it cost them the incumbent president.
How about that? We spent some time while we were in Chicago with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Congresswoman from Florida, of course, was chair of the Democratic National Committee at one time, who talked about this idea of expanding the map even into states like hers in Florida. Larry, here's what she said.
Don't sleep on our state. We have some metrics that are emerging. Remember, for most election cycles in this century, we have been a purple state. We've been hyper-competitive. Barack Obama won Florida both times that he ran. The momentum is in our direction. No one should sleep on Florida.
No one should sleep on Florida. Larry, what year is it? Is it time to pull Democrats in off the ledge, or is that actually going to be the story of this campaign?
Well, I would advise people to sleep on Wyoming and West Virginia, among other states. There's no point in paying attention there.
Yeah,
Florida,
sure.
It's so big and so important. Yes, you'll pay attention. The same with Texas. I'm sure there's some year in the future, I will be 6 feet under, but there is some year when Texas will finally turn blue. There is some year when Florida is going to turn blue again. It's possible that it's this year, but I sure wouldn't count on it.
As always, straightforward from Larry Sabato. It's great to see you, Larry. I hope you get some rest. Thank you, as always, for being with us today on Bloomberg. Coming up, we'll be joined by former Democratic Congresswoman and former member of the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack, Stephanie Murphy. It's ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thank you for joining us here on the Friday edition as former President Donald Trump's Bedminster Golf Club is set to host a fundraiser next month to raise money for defendants in the January 6th riots. Tickets at the so-called January 6th Gala, as they're calling it, range from $1,500 to $50,000. And to be clear, Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani are listed as invited. It is not clear they are attending. But joining us now is Stephanie Murphy, the former Democratic Congresswoman of Florida, former member of the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack. Congresswoman, it's always great to have you. Welcome back to Balance of Power. I can't imagine your thoughts on this. It's beyond some of the things that we've heard calling this the J6 Awards Gala. The flyers have been printed. Photo of Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani on the front. What does this tell you about the way the Trump campaign is going to use this issue for the rest of the cycle?
It never ceases to amaze me, the links he'll go to try to defend people who not only attacked the Capitol, but hurt and attacked law enforcement officers on that day. What worries me even more than what he's doing about the January 6th protesters and rioters and is what he's laying the groundwork for this coming January 6th. Recently this week, he's already said, he's not focused on getting his people out to vote. He just wants to make sure that the other side doesn't cheat. And it's language like that that reminds me of the language he used in the run-up of January 6, 2020, that got all of those people riled up and motivated them to attack the Capitol. I think it's a really dangerous path we're on.
Interesting moment last night at a Democratic convention, and I know you were in the hall to see Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, who, of course, shared his role with you on the January 6th committee, largely shut out from the party and certainly condemned by Donald Trump. He spoke on the stage in prime time last night at the DNC. Let's listen to what he said.
I believe true strength lies in defending the vulnerable. It's in protecting your family. It's in standing up for our Constitution and our democracy. That is the soul of being a conservative. It used to be the soul of being a Republican, but Donald Trump has suffocated the soul of the Republican Party.
So the way you see it, Stephanie, is conservatism and the Republican Party two different things?
I think there's a real split within what was the Republican Party. And it's reflected in the fact that when you were in Milwaukee at their convention, you didn't see former Republican leadership there. There was no George Bush, no Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan or any of those folks. So there's a huge group of Republicans who consider themselves to be conservatives who are without a home in the MAGA Republican Party that exists today. And at our convention, we also had Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. Both Duncan and Kinzinger being at the DNC creates a permission structure for some of these homeless Republicans to vote for the Harris-Walz ticket. And as Jeff Duncan put it, he said, not thinking about it as being a Republican or a Democrat, but rather being a patriot.
Well, here's how Vice President Harris put it last night as she described her view of Donald Trump.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
I assume that you agree with her, Congresswoman. What would those consequences be then?
I think the consequences range from everything around democracy. As he has said, this will be the last time that Americans have to vote. I mean, it's unclear exactly what he means by that, but that certainly sounds foreboding. But also just to regular rights, reproductive rights, the marriage equality. There's a whole lot of things that he and his administration, if he were to get a second term, they have planned for America that could have some very serious consequences and take us back to decades before in this country. And it's a place that I think a lot of people don't want to go to.
Yeah. We've been spending quite a bit of time last couple of days here, and maybe you've been part of this conversation about Democrats' chances improving in your state of Florida. It is looking like the Harris campaign might be in better shape there. Democrats are considering spending money there. It's not a purple or blue state, Congresswoman. How would you describe it? And is that worth Democrats' investment in this cycle?
One thing that has been a part of Harris now being at the top of the ticket is that down-ballot races aren't facing the same headwinds that they were when Biden was at the top of the ticket. And there are some really key races here in Florida that, for which without Biden at the top of the ticket, there are real opportunities to flip. I would say Whitney Fox, who's running against Anna Paulina Luna, one of these House races that's very possible to flip from red to blue. So the investment into the state is going to be necessary, even if we aren't able to deliver the Electoral College votes for the president. I'm hopeful that the investment will help Democrats down ballot win in some of these key seats across the state.
Well, Susan Delbene, who runs the DCCC, told us yesterday they're all wearing pins that say flip 4 in 24. That is the math at the moment for Democrats in the House. Big thanks to former Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy of Florida. Great to see you, Congresswoman. Welcome back. And we'll talk again soon. Coming up, our political panel will join us to close out the week. We've got a lot to talk about on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking earlier today held a news conference to say he's throwing his support behind former President Donald Trump and suspending his presidential campaign. While he's at it, RFK's sister putting out a statement in response to the announcement saying, quote, "Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It's a sad ending to a sad story," unquote. Joining us now, our political panel. Lisa Camusa-Miller is with us, former RNC Communications Director, host of the Friday Reporter podcast. And Lincoln Mitchell, Columbia University School of International Public Affairs lecturer. Great to see you both. And welcome. Lisa, I'll start with you here. Donald Trump gets a big endorsement from RFK Jr. A couple months ago, this might have been a pretty big deal. Does anybody care today?
Well, I think the Republican campaign is actually seeing that Robert F. Kennedy has supporters on TikTok, supporters in sort of the youth vote and the youth movement. And so they are probably seeing this excitement behind the Democratic ticket and saying, maybe this is our way to sort of capture some of that. But do I think it makes a difference? No, I actually don't think it makes any difference at all.
Well, as we've seen RFK's vote share drop significantly, Lincoln, since Joe Biden dropped out of the race. He's in mid-single digits, maybe low single digits, depending on the poll that you're looking for. But can't that be enough to cause enough noise in a close call in a swing state to make a difference?
Maybe. I mean, I think we should be careful about a math equation that says, you know, Kennedy's polling at 4%, we're going to take that and just add that to Trump. If that were the case, yes, it would make the difference. But, you know, a good chunk of that 4% is going to stay home. Anybody who's supporting a third-party candidate this late in the game is very likely somebody who doesn't vote all the time, who doesn't follow politics all that closely. To think they're just going to go as a lump sum to Trump is wrong. That's just not how politics work. Now, Kennedy, to a great extent, was always in this race to help Trump. That was clear to me. You know, and then what became clear was that it's not 1980 or 1990 where the Kennedy name has this magic that Democrats are like magnetically attracted to. And he wasn't pulling votes away. Most of his votes were in fact coming to Trump. Many of them will go home to Trump, but I just don't see it making that big of a difference. I mean, Kennedy is very much a fringe actor. It kind of underscores it's not a strategy to move towards attracting more centrist, rational, thoughtful voters, and those are kind of the swing voters here. So I don't think it's that big of a deal when all is said and done.
Well, Lisa, Lincoln outlines the scenario that keeps Democrats up at night, people staying home, especially young people. We just came off the Democratic National Convention. You and I were talking over the course of the week about how things were going. How did Kamala Harris do last evening in landing the message that matters to undecided voters?
I think it's a great introduction. I think that the convention alone and the energy and all the moments that came out of it, whether or not people watched it breathlessly from Monday to Thursday or they just saw the moments online, I think that there really was a message of hopefulness, and she really introduced herself in a way that is new and fresh and different. And the thing that I've taken away from all of this is that she and the Democratic Party have really done a good job of defining Donald Trump as the incumbent that is not popular, and that she is something new and fresh and different. And we all know that that's not entirely the case, but it is the way it feels in the narrative now.
Lincoln, Larry Sabato was on with us a short time ago this hour. He said the question to ask about a speech like this one, did the candidate appear presidential? Did they look like they could sit behind the resolute desk and do the job to people who were sitting home watching? What do you think?
You know, I was watching the speech again this morning, and I think something happened where I had to pause it to, do something else. And I looked at the image and I said to myself, I actually did say this to myself, she looks very presidential. But then I asked why. Because Kamala Harris does not look like any of our previous presidents, right? She would be our first female president. That is just a fact that we can't, it's just there. She'd also be our second non-white president. So we would have, 45 white guys, Barack Obama and her. But she looks presidential. And what strikes me is that one of the reasons she looks presidential is because of the overlap or the intersection between the arts and politics. And going back to the late 90s, we've seen American presidents, and I know this is an obscure point, but I think it's an important one, portrayed in film, portrayed on television. I'm talking about in fictional, TV shows and movies, as things other than white men. So visually, that helps her get over a threshold that to older voters, she looks unlike any president we've ever had. Clearly, she sounded like a president. And what struck me was when she talked about foreign policy, her views on foreign policy, for the most part, would have sounded fine. Would have sounded normal coming out of Hillary Clinton's mouth, Bill Clinton's mouth, John McCain's mouth, Mitt Romney's mouth. And when you talk about someone saying presidential, the test is always, how could they sit across the table from a Putin or a Xi Jinping or someone like that? And what we saw yesterday was this is somebody who probably would frighten a Putin or a Xi Jinping. And I say that as a positive.
Yeah. What do you think about that with our remaining moment? Will geopolitics play a role in this election? She talked about a lot of issues last night. Are people thinking about that 3 a.m. call?
I think that they are. I think that that's probably the calculus that's going on their head. I think Lincoln's point is very good. She looked like a leader. She looked like someone who could sit at the desk and make strong points. Also, too, if you contrast with her tone and her tenor to the tone and the tenor of the RNC, as I said earlier, I mean, I think that there's a lot of hopefulness, a lot of strength, and a lot of positivity, which is what we all identify as really patriotic American values. And that, I think, is a very big contrast to Donald Trump's.
Disappointed there was no Beyonce? Didn't happen. Our thanks to Lisa Camosa Miller and Lincoln Mitchell. The rumors were very loud last night inside the hall. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter. Find it on the terminal and online with a lot to review from this week's DNC. Thanks for spending the week with us on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.